Hi everyone, and welcome to webinar number 5. We're going to be talking today about the digital technologies curriculum specific for secondary school teachers. Today I have with me Nathan Allison, who is the Education Manager down in Victoria for DLTV. And I've got all the way from Queensland, Sue Isbell, and she is the e-learning coordinator at Kelvin Grove State College in Queensland. Thank you so much to Nathan and Sue for joining me today. So as always, it is a jam-packed session. And we've really tailored the information specifically for secondary school teachers today. First, we're going to start up with understanding the curriculum and really looking at some misconceptions and also some themes that do run within the Digitech curriculum. Then we're going to show you some ways and some tools and resources that can help you unpack the curriculum so you actually understand a little bit further those content descriptions and achievement standards that you have as well. All three of us are going to be sharing some different lesson ideas for you and resources to show you where to go and help you build a better repertoire of the resources that you have for years 7 to 9. Then at the very end, we've got some question time. Now, please feel free, if you do have any questions at any time, to send them through. If you have a specific question that you'd like to ask either myself, Sue or Nathan, just pop our names at the beginning of that question, and at the very end of it, we will then make sure that they specifically answer that question. Now, if you're actually watching this as a recording, we have all of this information that will be available through the ACS ICT educators community. So you'll notice there that if you are watching this, and also if you'd like to refer back to any of this, pop on and join the community there at that website. We will be talking about this a little bit later on as well, so don't stress if you don't have a chance to write it down just yet. Now, one thing that I want to start us off with is when we are looking at the digital technologies curriculum is talking about the difference between the digital technologies curriculum and the ICT capabilities. Now, we're not going to dive too much into this today because we did last week. So if you're still a little bit unsure about the difference between the digital technologies curriculum and the ICT capabilities, Daryl English was one of my guests from last week, and he dived into this for about a good 10 minutes. And I was also looking at the 3 ways of thinking as well. So if you'd like some information about that, watch the first 10 minutes of webinar number 4. Even though it is for primary school, we talk about it as a general thing. One thing that I wanted to focus on today, and I notice that it does come up for secondary school teachers, is really what's asking from leadership. And a lot of times leadership don't actually know the difference between ICT and the capabilities. And a lot of teachers I'm noticing are going to be asked to actually teach IT. And what I want us to think about is now straight away finding a way to think about how you could ask the teachers and the leadership if you're going to be teaching the digital technologies curriculum or the ICT capabilities. And a way to do that is ask them a question like this to say, are we focusing on how digital technology works, which is your digital technologies curriculum, or are we trying to develop the presentation and document skills with our students? As soon as they're answering a question like that, you'll know which way to go down. Obviously, the direction of leadership is going to impact and influence the lessons that you bring out. Most likely, it is going to be the digital technologies curriculum, but you really want to make sure that you're actually on point with that as well. Next one, Nathan, is I want to talk, Nathan is now going to be talking about how there's a little bit misconceptions and the theme of data that is in the digital technologies curriculum. Thanks, Nathan.
Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, so from a secondary point of view, you know, some of the things that come up or some of the questions that come up in secondary schools have to do with, you know, what changes with the topic of data, as well as a couple of the other strands in the Digitech curriculum. When we get to secondary, what we do with data is more formalized and more detailed than in primary. One of the things we're concerned with is the quality of data. Things like authenticity, accuracy, timeliness, being able to define those words and understanding how we can kind of sort of give our data criteria of how useful it is and the quality of it. We also become more concerned with the security of our data. So if you're doing say you've used a Google form to do an online survey, one of the things you might get your students to do once they get that data is to depersonalize it. That is to remove details that can identify individuals. And also learn at least some basic ways of how data gets secured. And if it's an Excel spreadsheet, that might be at the first simple stage, just being able to put a password on that file. So things like that, depersonalizing and securing data. You may also, particularly at year 9 and 10, we start to talk about things like structured data in the curriculum. So this might be things like moving from a spreadsheet to a relational database. And relational databases are usually covered in senior years. In Victoria, that would be our VCE years, year 11 and 12. But yeah, you could also certainly get going on databases earlier and start looking at how data gets structured around, sort of similar to the way we do objects when we're coding. And then lastly, the curriculum also talks about using interactive solutions when communicating your information. So the final results of your data when you're communicating that information, you might be using a website, you might be using data dynamic visualizations. That is, it might be an online platform like Tableau, but it might also be in your spreadsheet. You might make it interactive by having something you can click on to change the way the data is displayed. You might also use a sort of a program like, I think Microsoft Sway is one that kind of combines different ways of presenting data. So you might want to look at some of those ways that you can make the presentation of your information also interactive, not just multimedia, but interactive.
And then, Nathan, can you now talk about programming and how that changes and develops through the curriculum too?
Yeah, so again, in the secondary years, when we look at the strand the strand in Victoria we call creating digital solutions, which includes things like your coding, your designing algorithms, all of those things. Again, those things change a little bit in the secondary. One of the major changes that happens is that we transition from visual code, or code that's blocky, click-together code, the sort of thing that you might be used to if you use code.org or some of the blocky challenges that the ACA puts out. And we transition across to general purpose programming. And general purpose programming, you're going to have maybe students coming in who might have had a go already from primary, but you may also have students coming in who haven't even done visual programming. So that consolidation process at year 7 and 8 can be a challenge that your students, you want to get your students sort of up to speed. Another question that sometimes comes up here is, which language should I use? Which general purpose language is the best, or which one should I be doing at my school? Should I be doing more than one? And I've listed a few languages that sort of are popular, particularly Python and JavaScript are popular in schools. Swift is one that's popular if you're a Mac or Apple-based school. But I want to note that general purpose programming doesn't include everything. So, for example, if you're using software like GameMaker, while that's not necessarily a bad piece of software and it's great for coding and for learning games, the language that you're using in there may not be a general purpose language because it's only used within that software. Another point to make too is that HTML on its own, and even CSS on its own, is not a general purpose language. That's because it's about displaying, it's about the way the information will be formatted and displayed. So unless you add on JavaScript to that, you're not necessarily doing general purpose programming.
Beautiful. Thanks for that. And do you know what? I was actually going to ask you later on the difference between general purpose programming and HTML. So you've already answered one of my questions for today. Thanks, Nathan. And what about robotics as well? And then using and choosing the right type of technology? Yeah,
and again, when we have robots are still great in secondary. Heaps of secondary schools use robots. We just have a few things we have to consider for practicality, and some of these are also common in primary schools too, but some of these are just really just logistical things, like if you're going to say, let's say you're using something like Lego robots and you have a few different class timetables, is it going to be practical for them all to have a go at building the same rover robot? It often takes a couple of periods just to build the main robot. So practical issues like that of how you're going to use those resources. Whether the resources you've got allow for you to do general purpose programming. That's a big one, because it's great if whatever robot you've got lets you do Python or JavaScript or another, maybe C, C#, another general purpose language like that. Also, the inputs and outputs, do they allow for your programs to be sophisticated enough? Some robots are a little bit limited in terms of what sensors they have and what they can provide, so it's important that you choose well there as well. And it's great too if you can get a robot that allows for expandability. You can add things onto it. You can configure it in different ways. We could do a whole webinar just on different types of robots, but that's some of the considerations. I've also got there to mention that electronics and particularly things like the microbit can be great. They do allow for general purpose programming. You can do both Python and JavaScript on it. I think later we might be looking at Arduino as well, but microbit's a great option to look at for electronics. The big point I want to make, whether it's robots or electronics, is my last point there, that your code needs to be sufficiently complex. Students need to be able to demonstrate that they can create algorithms with more than just a simple if this then that. One of the challenges of any kind of physical tech, whether it's robots or electronics, is that your programs will sometimes just be, oh, if I hear a clap, then turn the light on. And that's a starting point, but unless there's a bit more complexity, it's a bit hard to really have students demonstrate their coding and their algorithm design. So you could add things like, maybe they have to clap and it counts how many times they clap and gives you different results. That's just one example, but you need to find ways to increase the complexity of the code that the students are putting out.
Thank you so much for that, especially with the complexity around it as well, because I know that real basic if then that is really part more so of the primary school curriculum rather than the expectations of the secondary school one. Speaking of the curriculum, unpacking this curriculum can be an extremely daunting and overwhelming experience if you don't have any experience within the digital technologies curriculum. For some teachers, it's a brand new curriculum and they've never had any experience teaching it. So I'm going to pass it on to Sue now, and she's going to share different ways of how social media can help us unpack that digital technologies curriculum and help us connect with other teachers who are in the same boat as us. Thanks, Sue.
Thanks, Catherine. I guess for me, being fairly new in Queensland to Digital Technologies Curriculum 2020 is our first mandatory year of implementation. So we do have a lot of teachers fairly new to it. And I work in a prep year 12 college. I've been leading teachers at all different stages of engagement with the curriculum. And for me, apart from the resources provided by the department, through the digital technologies hubs, etc., which I know has been mentioned previously, I have found using social media through Facebook groups, even Twitter, LinkedIn in particular for connecting in other aspects of it, but particularly some of and I've got some screenshots there of some of the Facebook social media groups have been excellent. It's a really safe space for teachers to unpack the curriculum, to ask questions if they're not sure of things, and to share resources. So particularly for new teachers, I really encourage getting engaged in social media groups, but also I guess I put the challenge out to more experienced teachers that's a fantastic way that you can guide other new teachers to the curriculum and support each other, so it becomes part of our professional learning communities.
Yeah, absolutely, Sue. I've actually just recently noticed that there's been a brand new VCE Facebook group that's just started as well. So if you are in Victoria and you are teaching the VCE Digitech curriculum and that part of it as well, is definitely get on board and connect with more teachers as well. I think we are even more limited with how many VCE and that year 11 and 12 teachers that we have around Australia as well. Thanks so much for that, Sue. And I've even seen Sue on some of the Facebook pages as well, and we've done a little bit of connection, so it's so lovely to connect with Sue on Facebook and those ones. Nathan, tell us about some of the resources that you've used and found quite handy when people are diving into that curriculum. What are some of the resources that you've come across?
Yeah, there's a few things mentioned here. One of the topics that a lot of teachers might struggle with is the network theory. So part of the curriculum does talk about network protocols and hardware. And this can be a completely alien topic for someone who doesn't have any background in IT or computer science or any of those fields. So in that instance, there is a textbook. It's one of the Nelson Cengage textbooks. It's not bad for at least giving you a grounding in some of that theory around networks, because it is one or two of the content descriptors in there. And on the topic of textbooks, there is also a great New Zealand online text with interactive activities called the CS Field Guide. Obviously, it's not Australian curriculum, but it can be a useful resource as well. CS Unplugged is a great resource for unplugged activities. I'm sure that'll get a mention in other webinars, but it's definitely worth going for. Unplugged activities are one that you can use without needing a computer or a device, but they're sort of activities you do in your classroom, and there are still relevant ones for secondary, particularly with networks and network theory. Another issue with networks is to draw on home and school setups as examples, perhaps. So see if you're able to get permission from your IT team at your school to have your kids kind of have a look at how your architecture of your network at school works, and think about how their home one works as well. Sorry, I just lost my notes here. There's also a unit on the Digitech Hub, and I remember we were discussing the issue with the Digitech Hub is a really huge website, and sometimes it seems like a flat file. You're not sure where to find things. So there is a great unit there, and I believe you have a resource document with all the links in to take you there. So yeah, so that can also be helpful to you. On the topic of transitioning from visual to general purpose programming, which I mentioned earlier, there are a few ways you can approach that. One of those is a sequence of videos that's on the Digitech Hub, which was mentioned. There's the third one. But there's also resources from the Australian Computing Academy at Grok Learning. There's code.org. There's a few others that will be in that resource document. But making that transition, it's great if you as the teacher can also not just keep up with the students, but have an understanding of the concepts and theory, rather than the students just going onto a self-paced thing on their own. If you can interrupt them and ask them things and have dynamic interaction there, that really helps augment self-paced courses that they might be using.
Thanks so much for that, Sue and Nathan. Another resource that I have found that has been quite useful for teachers is I found that when I've been working and connecting with teachers is that they've found the actual curriculum content descriptions to be quite ambiguous and wordy. And sometimes when you're looking for the specific understandings of it, it can be quite an arduous task to actually find the information that you're looking for exactly the content description and possibly part of that achievement standard that you're looking for. So what ACS has created is we've created a pack of resources for you that unpack the entire foundation to Year 10 curriculum. So you can see on this particular one, this is for the level Year 9 and 10 when they start to talk about user experience. Now, you may not be able to read it now, but rest assured you will be able to read it through the ICT educators community. So it's 2 A4 pieces of paper, and you can see at the top, it just talks about a very quick, short, sharp paragraph that introduces you to user experience. Then it talks about the curriculum expectations. So what you're, in plain speak, what you're actually supposed to be teaching and assessing the students on. You'll notice the 2 images on the larger piece of paper and the larger document there is that those 2 images are actually links to 2 YouTube videos. So rather than you trying to collect all of this information by yourself, which can be a very time-consuming task, we've put that information there together for you. One of my little favorite things, and I certainly had a lot of fun putting it together, is that we then created a PDF file, but also an infographic that shows you what user experience is and uses all of the language within that content description. What we also found is that teachers who were starting out in their journey really found these information and these bites of information really quickly and easy to use. So if you were to read and do all of this and watch the 2 videos, it will take you about 10 minutes to do. So it's a nice way to introduce you to those topics to then allow you to do some further investigation for yourself. Teachers found these really, really helpful, and what we then started to do is started to create information pieces for our students. So you can see here that this one is explaining RGB for our students in Year 7 to 8. What we've done with the ones that are student specific is that we talk about and we think about the level of reading comprehension for these students. It uses the same type of path, and within this particular one, it makes a connection between RGB and binary code as well, but it explains it in a plain speak, and you can see that a one-page document is really quite manageable for them to read. Down the bottom, you'll also see two little icons and images. There are also videos that are then linked to YouTube videos just to further explain what binary code is, and then further explains what the RGB is. Again, it's a document and a series of documents that enables you to push this information out to your students, knowing that it's there ready for their reading level. I know sometimes when I've been in the classroom and I've got my students to just go through and do a blind Google search, we can send them off for hours. What I wanted to do was create short, sharp pieces of information that gave them the right information at their reading level. So far what we've been able to come up with is that you can see that for the year 7 and 8 and the 9 and 10, all of the concepts and issues and ideas that are within that year 7 to 10 curriculum are all there. As far as the student information goes, that is a project that we are starting to develop as well. So that is something that is always ongoing. So if you are looking for anything specific for your students, please reach out to me, because it's actually part of my job to create these resources. And I also like to then run them and trial them with a teacher before it goes up onto our community of practice as well. Now, the lesson part, sometimes we can be so bombarded with what's out there that what's a really good starting point in different ideas to share with teachers and then provide them to your students. So, Nathan, can you tell us some of the ideas on some lessons that you've got that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I've got a couple of examples here of lessons that I guess demonstrate a couple of things. The first one is algorithm design and coding one. It's a number guessing game. In this case, it's like the game you might play with someone where they have to guess a number between 1 and 100. And we're going to develop the algorithm for this. The computer is the one trying to guess the number. So what we actually come up with here is a binary search algorithm. The computer is going to try and figure out as quickly as possible the secret number that you, the user, are thinking of. And we're going to do this in three steps. We're going to first just plan the program a little, plan the algorithm, make some notes, break it down. Then we're going to do either a flowchart or pseudocode. In this case, we're going to do pseudocode, which in the curriculum may be called structured English. And this is going to be our sort of algorithm design. And then I won't show you this part, but you could also then go on and code it using a general purpose language. So the first step, thank you, Catherine, on the next slide. So there's our little plan. Some things to think about. The user is going to think of a number between 1 and 100. The computer is going to take a guess. The user will be able to type lower or higher. We're simplifying a bit here. Ideally, there'd be a third option where the user says, you got it, but in this case, it's just lower or higher. The computer is going to keep guessing, and our algorithm will be simplified, so the computer is just going to keep guessing forever, and if you lie to it, that's too bad. So what does the computer need to keep in memory? Like, what does it actually need to remember? And you might talk to your students about this. If you are playing this game with someone, what are you keeping in mind? Because if you say 50 and then say, all right, it's lower than 50, what are you keeping in mind now? Well, you're now setting a boundary, aren't you? You're saying, all right, well, I know it can't be higher than 50. So somehow the computer's going to have to keep these things in memory. So let's start the pseudocode on the right-hand side here. So first thing is we'll display, think of a number. We'll give that instruction to the user. Then we'll set some variables, and these are our boundaries. These are the things the computer's going to remember. It's going to start by saying, well, 0's at the bottom, 100's at the top. And then we're going to do a loop or an iteration. And as I said, this loop's just going to go forever. And the computer's going to take a guess. It's going to get the average of the top and bottom. In other words, the first guess will be 50. Then it's going to ask the user, is it 50? Okay, what's the user going to respond? So the user's going to say either lower or higher. And we take that response from the user. Now, if the user says lower, what do we do? And this is the clever part of the algorithm. If the user says lower, then the computer says, right, my top boundary changes now to guess, because I know that it can't be any higher than that. If the user was to say higher, or the other alternative, it's the bottom boundary that changes. And then we go back to the same loop again. We take another guess. Maybe we said lower, and the computer now says, all right, 25. And we keep going until we guess the number. Now, as I said, that was a little simplified, but if we turn over to the next slide and see a potential final program, and this one's been done in Python, you can see here the program's been sort of coded in, and we realized a few things as we were coding that we also needed to put in. You notice there's a lot of stuff there where we had to round the number down, because otherwise we get numbers like 50.5 and 25.25 and things like that. So we have to round the numbers. We also put in a yes option so that if the user says yes, the computer will stop the program. It doesn't just go forever. But because we had our design already, it was much easier to make those extra changes when we came to doing the coding. The other little example that I've got, and there'll be a link to this in your resources, this is for, again, that network theory topic, and this combines it with a bit of coding as well. So it's a whole little sequence of lessons where you get BBC microbits, these little microcontrollers, you use alligator clips to hook them up, and you write fairly simple programs on them that allow you to tap out some Morse code using the button. And that way you can actually send little signals from one to the other just across those wires. So it's just up and down signals when you tap. So the next slide has a photo showing you sort of what that looks like in real life. So that's just the alligator clips wired up, and they're running on battery there. And then it sort of goes a little further. It starts to bring in other concepts. So for example, we've got a simulation of something like a hub, a network hub here, where the red microbit in the middle is just passing on whatever it receives to the other two microbits. And we start to bring in concepts like bit rate and the concept of a LAN. And then we also get to the point where we start to look at the concept of packet switching and collisions and routers and all these sorts of other concepts. And we have a kind of a pretend little internet there where the messages are going through. And then finally, we can look a little bit at security. So the final slide there, we got sequencing of packets. And you can literally hook yourself up using the alligator clip, and you can sniff the packets. You can see what information is coming through. So it's a great little demonstration of that. Now, a task like this, it's great because you're doing a bit of coding at the same time, but it's probably not the first thing you should do with microbits. You should probably get used to what microbits are first and how to code them. But it is a practical way of doing that network theory, so it's not just literally just out of a textbook. And there's a few other approaches in your resources there. There's a way to do it using wireless as well. So this is certainly not the only way, but it's great to have a hands-on way of tackling this topic as well.
Thanks so much for that, Nathan. And so can you tell us how you've been supporting other teachers and then also using industry and startups to support you, supporting your students as well?
Thanks, Catherine. I guess being in a Prep to 12 college, and we have a really big focus on pathways, and we talk about future abilities, and we talk about working way beyond today. When our principal put the challenge to us to raise our gaze as a leadership team with new curriculum coming in, I took that as an opportunity to look up from beyond the curriculum documents across all year levels and all subjects around digital technology. So we do often get quite caught up in the wording of our syllabus or our curriculum documents. And for me, it was a chance to stop, have a look around at what other resources can I and my team access as we implement this curriculum. I always have a real fear, particularly with digital technologies, which is so fast changing, that we can be caught in teaching something that possibly is no longer relevant to what's happening out in industry and in daily lives. So for me, that was really important to raise my gaze and make sure that we were meeting the needs for our students in the future. So I guess part of looking around and engaging with different people is building that professional learning community. So most of us in our, wherever we are, we will generally have a library in Queensland. We're very lucky to have the Edge and the State Library of Queensland. We're right next door to QUT, which is fantastic, and Gardens Point isn't far away. So where we can engage with universities, libraries, etc. There are so many opportunities out there for not just professional development, but to access resources that we may not have access to in our schools. So looking beyond the school grounds is part of that as well. And for me, I'm very passionate about connecting with industry. Again, I guess because we've got a pathways focus and we tend to backward map through our senior curriculum all the way back through. For me, it was really important to look at those goalposts, which, as we know, are ever changing with digital disruptors or digital transformation tools that are coming in. So for me, having worked with a lot of different industries, I've been hearing the same messages about them, how they're really desperate for students with both, we talk about soft skills, which, you know, we are always doing that in our curriculum, but in terms of our curriculum, making sure that our students are aware of those important concepts, being able to develop. It's not just all about the coding, it's being confident and capable users and developers of digital solutions across industry. So once upon a time, I would have mainly focused on the ICT industry, but now luckily in Queensland, we are so lucky to have the different Gateway to Industry Skills programs. So I've worked very closely with what was manufacturing and engineering, and with Industry 4.0, they've now become advanced manufacturing. Have also worked with the Minerals and Energy Academy, their top 3 cyber data software developers. So it's making sure that the experiences that we give our students and the projects that we set and the context that we put our projects in, right back from the senior through to what we call our middle school, is working towards the goalposts and meeting those needs of industries. So feedback coming from industry is that universities are no longer a valid pathway for our students. They're actually looking at schools as the start of the talent pipeline. So by having our students engaging with industry, going out to industry on tours, staff and students participating in different tours, it's really making our students aware of how what they're learning links in to all industries in future. Thanks, Catherine. And I guess part of that, I think any of us who've been in this game for a while, there are now so many different technologies, development tools that we need to get our heads around. I think we've all been feeling through COVID how many different virtual online conferencing tools we're using. It's almost a little bit the same when we've been teaching different development tools using different languages over the years. So for me, trying to be an expert in everything across the whole range of ICT's digital technologies curriculum is almost impossible. It's so difficult for us to keep current with what's happening out there, and that's where those industry experts and mentors, now these can be ex-students, they can be parents, friends of friends, whoever you can make contact with through social media, as I mentioned previously, is excellent, to actually talk to them when you're trying to plan for a unit or set up a project. Well, can you tell me more about how this might work in industry? And I often find having that context and a real world project that students can see that connection to life outside of school gets much greater engagement, and then students can see the value of what they're doing. I also find just being able to get some stories, particularly videos. We're teaching a video generation. Our students go off and learn things on YouTube on their own, not always learn things the way we need them to meet the requirements of the curriculum, but just being able to explain a concept that you're trying to teach by showing a story or having a video of somebody speaking about how they use that particular technology can be amazing. So we're doing some work around Arduino. Internet of Things is a context. We actually went out to an industry organisation who is using an Arduino sensor and is digitising everything and moving to an Industry 4.0 focus. So that's been fantastic. And the other one that's got me, I guess, upskilling along the way or raising my awareness. I don't know how many people have heard of meetup.com. It's an online platform. There's an app. Any type of technology is out there. So if you were wanting to teach a unit on artificial intelligence, something on blockchain, something on robotics, there is a meetup for virtually everything in almost every city. And if you can't connect with COVID, they've all been engaging with people online as well. So lots of opportunities through that as well. And I guess I'll just quickly throw in feedback that I've had from industry is these days having a degree isn't always guaranteeing students a job. I often ask people the question, how many people do you know with a university degree and a HECS debt and they have to pivot to something else? So if we can get our students developing expertise, even if it's supporting a different program in the school or developing, we've had some, they were year 8 students, developed an app around house points. So those types of things also help students to build their resumes. So for when they're looking past school at a pathway, they do have quite practical experience of projects in a portfolio that they can share. And as we know, having a group of ICT experts in our classrooms, students who are, we may have trialled something in a makerspace or a digispace, having those students who are a little bit ahead of the others when there's questions coming up can support the teacher in the classroom as well. Okay, and I guess the other area that we've been working in, which we've found to be fantastic, particularly through our middle school, is engaging with the startup community. So in Brisbane, and I know in every other area and even in regional places, there are lots of startup communities. These days, most startups have some sort of tech degree to them. They're running on the smell of an oily rag. They don't always have connectivity to more experienced people or their test audience. So by engaging with the startup community, this has helped build our professional learning community for our staff. It's been able to engage our students. So for example, we've had virtually robotic, they're not doing so much at the moment. They had a Raspberry Pi autonomous vehicle with camera vision that was controlled through augmented reality. Now, they brought that in, they worked with our Year 9 digital technology students. Our students could understand how it worked, they could test it, they could give it feedback. So that's giving a real world context to what students are learning, helping them learn more, and to be encouraged that there are other pathways out there that they can take their studies into. We also have students, we have a partnership with Fishburners, one of our local startup communities. I am in River City Labs at the moment, so I do move around them all a little bit. And through that program, we actually encourage our students to take an idea for a digital solution. Generally, it's something that they've been doing in their curriculum, but they can then work with mentors, and we've now partnered with Scott Miller from the Young BOP Industries, through the Young Entrepreneurs Hub. So we're actually linking it to curriculum, but then also providing an extension opportunity for our students. Starting at the moment, we're working with Year 9s and into 10s, so it's a bit of a transition before with our new curriculum coming in, but that is an amazing place to connect with people. And even for your own professional learning, we're moving into augmented and virtual reality, not just as a subject area, but even as a tool to use, whether it's for learning or students developing content. So there's just so many opportunities for learning through the startup communities.
Thanks so much for that, Sue. That was really, really engaging to see how Kelvin Grove College is really grabbing the community and seeing what else is happening in your community. It's really refreshing to see, especially how you've been connecting with the startup community as well. That's really interested me. The next thing I want to talk about now is a couple of units of work that I've created with teachers, with high school teachers, and they are available on the ACS ICT community of practice. So the first one is, and both of them are about more the design focus for the units of work. Now, the first one here is called Stress Less. And this is an app that it looks at how students are managing their own well-being. So they take out negative emotions and they find ways in which that they can cater and deal with those negative emotions. They put that information into an app. And so you can see then the app then becomes personalized for them, and it helps them manage and navigate when they're experiencing negative emotions. And I know that we can, as adults and as humans, we can also then have different negative emotions and how we're feeling as well. And so this little project is catered for our students. And I think something like this project would be a really good one to do, especially after our students have gone through something like COVID and the disruptions that they've had, not only at their school life, but also within their whole life in general. So it takes you through the whole entire, sorry, I'll actually just go back for that one. So this is a little prototype that I created here. And you can see the very first screen is the home screen. And they were very excited when I actually had a gift. And the woman on the cartoon actually goes up and down. And so she's like meditating. And you can see there that then after the home screen, it opens up to the menu screen. And students then have a choice to, if they're feeling confident, to press the confident and see what happens on that one. And what are some things that we can provide to themselves that would help them feel confident and continue being confident throughout the day. The next one we have along is that they're feeling a little bit frustrated. And so when they open up the frustrated area, that's the one in green, that they actually then open up some calming music, just to, 30 seconds just to calm themselves down. Interestingly enough, when I was coding this one, I was getting frustrated because the music wouldn't actually code properly. And I thought it was quite ironic that the frustration one was making me frustrated. Then the very next one is, the green one is the nervous one. So you can see that when they do press the nervous one, it opens up to the nervous screen, and it's actually got them an opportunity to actually express what's making them feel nervous. And then they can write down 3 different things that will help them overcome that nervous situation. Every single unit of work that is created through ACS also comes with this little beauty at the end of it. This is an assessment rubric for you. So you can see there that it is aligned to the Australian curriculum. However, we are aligning them to other curricula as well. So if you are using the New South Wales science and syllabus as well, I'm not sure if that goes up, the science and technology syllabus, I'm not sure if that goes up to year 9 and 10, but we can certainly align it to your syllabus, and it is aligned to the Victorian curriculum. As well. And obviously this one here, the example here is the Australian curriculum. So at the very start, you can see that they're all the content descriptions. Then it's aligning the content descriptions to the session. We then provide you with the example of the assessment piece that they should provide, and then also a little assessment statement at the very end. This will then help you write reports if that's something that you're needing to report on. Or if your school is going down the path of ongoing assessment, then it's certainly helpful for you to write any comments that you might need to push out at the time that they're doing those activities. As you can see, it doesn't hit every single area, and there is a little bit of a discussion around the type of platform that we used, and that was Thunkable. And so Thunkable is a block coding platform, and we decided to go with that one because it does go in depth with the actual program, but it is a block coding. And because we were thinking when I was writing this that it would be for year 7s to 8, it really was a way to introduce our students who had gone through block coding, but also the design phase as well. And I think that as soon as you start to then bring in the coding side of it, it becomes quite a complex task for the students to do. It also means that within this particular unit of work, we didn't actually assess against the visual programming and the general purpose programming because we were using block coding. But you can also see that we were able to assess against other areas of the curriculum that include the representation of an image in binary code, and we looked at RGB and how RGB is represented throughout their app. It also meant that there was a bit of a discussion around ensuring that the colours that they had picked were consistent because of the RGB and the codes that they could use with that as well. We were then decomposing real world problems with it. There was a lot around the user experiencing, and it was also about planning and managing projects. It was really great to get a project like this to drive their own learning and for them to be able to connect with something that is for them as well. The next one that I want to talk about, and this was for year 9s and 10s, and this is creating entrepreneurs. So thinking about the type of things that Sue does with her students, I wanted to bring in that entrepreneur and that creative thinking for our students and provide them a platform to think like entrepreneurs. And there is a lot of how entrepreneurs think and the influence of digital technologies in there as well. And so I was thinking about how Airbnb and how Uber and those sharing economies and that gig economy has disrupted making money, and I wanted to bring that into the classroom. So the students then were given the opportunity to plan a business that would leverage off digital technologies. They analysed how digital technology is currently used to help entrepreneurs make a successful business, and they were certainly very keen to hear about the amount of money that they had been earning as well. They then started to engage with stakeholders, so other students in their school, to ensure that the data that they collected, to ensure then that they were actually designing something that was meaningful for students at their age as well. What I loved about this one is that we implemented this one and we trialled it into a very disengaged STEM class. And by the end of it, we had, out of the 26 students had developed an app, an idea, and were very passionate about that. Then it also came to the time where they needed to present their ideas, almost think about a little bit of a Shark Tank style as well. And I was there, we were looking through them. But what we found is that all but one of those students came up and presented their idea. So by the end of, at the beginning of that unit and that year, we had very disengaged students. By the end of it, they were so passionate about the ideas that they had created that they were able to put their own spin on it, and they were able then to contribute to solve a problem that they felt that 16 to 17-year-olds had. One of the real life-changing moments for me as a teacher is when one of the students who had never programmed or never coded before saw the value of an app that he was creating, and that even though the project had finished and they didn't have to program the whole entire app, but he wanted to take that project and actually finish it off, and then he wanted to actually pitch it somewhere else. So what happened in the classroom, he could see the value of what he was doing and wanted to transfer that pitch from the classroom into real life. If we cannot, like, that just made me so happy as a teacher and so excited to see that we had made a real difference on those students, because they could see the value and the reasoning behind using digital technologies in their world. So again, we've got the assessment statement for it. So you can see that there were bits and pieces. And again, it was going down the path of that design thinking side of things as well. We used the same platform, Thunkable, because the teacher was quite keen to learn that program. Again, it was the visual programming. It wasn't the general purpose programming, but these students had never coded before. So again, we took away that coding and we let the coding part of the curriculum be assessed at a different time. Coding wasn't the purpose. We wanted to create a project that would be real life and utilize that digital technology for those students. So it was all about evaluating different types of technology, looking at the functional and non-functional requirements, and really understanding what user experience is all about as well. Next one that I want to talk about is that when you are getting into those higher year levels, we've got something called the ACS Foundation, and they have provided an interactive career wheel. So just like Sue was talking about before, this is a valuable resource because each of those quadrants that we have within the circles has got different videos for different career paths that you can go down. So as you can see that we've got the green one is all about the design side. So if you go down an animator or a UX design, that will then open up to different people talking YouTube videos as well that looks at what a career in that area would look like, and also breaks down even the type of salary that those students would be earning. So it really then, it's a great tool to bring in the real life experiences of what is happening in the world into your classroom. And it's really make a great link from what they're doing in school to then to that work as well. We can then also see the next one that I want to talk about with ACS Foundation. If you're not aware of the Big Day In, this is a full day conference that is aimed at secondary school students and university students interested in a career in ICT and technology. So what that whole day is about is providing our students an understanding of what a career in IT actually looks like. These are held right across Australia, and they normally attract about 200 students. So if you haven't heard of ACS Foundation, I'd certainly recommend doing a little bit more investigation into Big Day In and see if they have a Big Day In conference in your capital city. Now, at the moment, we all know that those face-to-face conferences aren't happening. However, Big Day In are actually creating some virtual webinars as well. So you can see down there, they're up to week 4. These will be on a weekly basis at Wednesday at 11 a.m. However, they actually have them recorded. So it's a great tool for you to be able to access at a later time, again, connecting your students with real life experiences of digital technologies and how what they're learning in the classroom is relevant to a career in IT as well. All of the resources that we have spoken about today are available in the resource folder that you should be able to access now, and there's a file called Website Links. That has all of the information there available for you, so you don't have to worry about trying to write too much down as well. So the final thoughts for today is we need to ensure that we are honouring the curriculum and ensure that your school and your leadership understands the difference between the ICT capabilities and how ICT might be embedded throughout the curriculum or the digital technologies curriculum. When you're unpacking the curriculum, take your time and remember, just like Sue said, that we don't expect everyone to be an expert with everything. Locate information that will help you unpack that curriculum. Utilize social media because it's a great way to connect with like-minded teachers and help keep up with some ideas. I've seen grants as well, applications for grants go up, different types of robotics, and anything new that's come up as well. Teaching coding, when you are teaching coding as well, ensure that you take the time to do the pseudocode and flowcharts as well. That ensures then that your students aren't just focusing on the coding and the sentences that they're doing, that they're looking at the bigger, broader picture and the reasoning of why we're doing coding as well. It means that once they get to their coding and if they do find errors, they have that broader understanding and that bigger picture of what the code is going to be doing. And finally, see if there's ways that you can engage with industry and to be able to connect your students with real life ICT careers and jobs, even possibly getting some of those startup communities into your classroom so they'll be able to connect to see how what they're learning in the classroom is relevant to the outside world. Thank you so much for joining us today. And all of that information, again, it was certainly a jam-packed information session. And so all of the information is available at our ICT Educators Community of Practice. So you can see that we have a dedicated forum that will summarise this, and I'll also put up the slideshow for you as well, and it will contain any of the resources. So if you are watching this at a later date, head to the webinar, the dedicated forum, Webinar 6, Digital Technologies for Secondary School Teachers. All of this information there is available for you. If you'd like to connect with me to create more resources and units of work, please feel free. That's my email address there. And underneath, if you're a Twitter fan like me, connect with me. Could be a great way to use social media to be the first person to connect with. And finally, all of the resources that I spoke about, the student and teacher information, and also the 2 units of work that I briefly described, they're available in our resource centre. If you happen to come from a school that is Foundation to Year 12, we have covered the whole entire Foundation to Year 10 Australian curriculum and also the other curricula as well. We have a lot of supportive documents for you. Now, is there any questions that might be coming? Oh, we already have some questions coming in. That is amazing. So let's have a look. So the first one is, so I might hand this one over to you. Would year 11 and 12 students ever assist the teachers of the lower high school years? Have you ever done anything like that to get the students helping the lower years?
We have, yes, being prepped to 12. I mean, I guess not so much in the curriculum. Our students go down and help with the Junior School Coding Club. They help out in other events, but we do things like using other year levels to test apps or different digital solutions that students have created if they're the target audience, to get feedback around their validation of their prototypes, etc. So yeah, we try to do as much as we can, but I think secondary makes that a little bit more difficult with timetabling and being able to make classes aligned, or if they align at the same time.
Yep. Does anyone else have any questions? Don't forget to pop them through the chat because we're very quiet today. No more questions. If you do have any other questions or you'd like to continue this conversation, please utilise that forum that I was talking about earlier as well through the ICT educator community. Now, this ICT virtual development series continues. We have got 8 of these ones. So we're up to webinar number 6. And so next week, that's all about developing a scope and sequence. Now, it is based for primary school teachers. However, if you are completely new in this space and you're really not sure where to go with the scope and sequence, the first little half of that could actually help you bring some ideas in that are actually things that are already happening in your school. So it might be a fresh way to look at something. And I've also created lots of different planning documents for you as well. So that little part of it, it might be valuable for you to come in. Obviously, the curriculum talk may not be applicable to you, but the process that I go through might actually help you come up with some more units of work. The following one after that is one that I would highly recommend you coming in, is the industry professionals and education experts. I've actually got 3 CEOs that are going to talk about that transition from high school students into the workplace and the type of skills that they're actually needed in the workplace, and look at the difference between what's happening in an education space and a professional space and for their careers, and talking about what they see as vital skills and how we can translate that back into the classroom. Still no more questions through, so I think that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and I really hope to see you on the 17th of June when we do have the industry speakers coming in. Thank you so much for watching, and I cannot thank Sue and Nathan enough either for joining in on the conversation today.